Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar series. It's called the Evolving Indigenous Economy, which is defining the new normal. It's interesting that we're sort of in these times right now, and certainly I want to thank First Nations Bank for participating in our kickoff inaugural webinar series here. We're trying to have these every Thursday at 1 o'clock. We might move the time maybe a little later as we move on through our series, but certainly at 1 o'clock we'd like to have it this week and next week. It's essentially members only. So if you know people who would like to be part of the the webinar and that kind of thing, that you could certainly become a member and certainly participate in these webinar series. What we wanted to do in this in sort of the series is first really look at some of the support programs that are going on in Canada, and that's our first webinar series. Then we're going to move to more financial aspects, which include kind of the expenditure reporting that's going on with COVID, as well as remote auditing. I know a number of people are moving into that, being ready for that. And then we want to do a bit of a dive into human resources on the idea of returning to the workplace, because we're all going to have to give a thought to that and how we do that. And then we'll start moving into sort of the economic impact of going forward of the Indigenous economy, and finally do some specialized sort of series on cybersecurity, as well as investment portfolios and that kind of thing. So, it's certainly an opportunity for us to learn through technology and certainly define define sort of the workplace that we're going to be going back into. So, so I certainly hope that you are part of this series and continue to be as we move through this. So I'd like to introduce our two panelists on our webinar today. Our first panelist is Kevin Michael, and Kevin is a Vice President of Commercial Banking at First Nations Bank of Canada, where Kevin leads a dedicated commercial unit specializing in providing banking services to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit government organizations that include the Business Economic Development Corporations. Kevin has worked in the banking industry, lending for the past 25 years, and has a BA honors degree in economics from the University of Saskatchewan. Kevin has a passion for seeing Indigenous groups thrive in developing their communities and business investments, and he is a member of the Beards and Okimasa First Nation and has lived in the city of Saskatoon for the past 24 years. Our other panelist is Dan Murza, as the Associate Vice President of Commercial Banking for First Nations Bank of Canada, and is based in his head office in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. From there, he currently manages and oversees the bank's commercial account management group, who serve its commercial customers based across Canada. Dan has a Bachelor of Commerce in Finance and Business Economics from the University of Saskatchewan, and has 20+ years of related business education and business banking experience, with a focus on serving the financial needs of Indigenous governments and organizations and their economic development subsidiary companies. His direct commercial banking experience with Indigenous communities covers a wide range of industries, including real estate, industrial contracting and construction, forestry, hospitality, oil and gas, gaming, retail, and community infrastructure. Through his time serving these markets, he has developed a strong passion and commitment to the growth of the Indigenous economy in Canada. Although Dan's experience have taken him to communities in all corners of the country, he is happy to call Saskatoon home with his wife and 3 kids. So I hope you certainly welcome both Kevin and Dan here, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. By all means, Kevin, just share with us your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Terry, for inviting us to do the first webinar through AFOA. One of the things that as First Nations Bank we would like to do is focus on talking about government support programs, but from an Indigenous bank perspective. and then focus on a couple of key areas, and two areas that we work on significantly, and that was working with our First Nation Indigenous government clientele, and then also dealing with our Indigenous business clientele as well. We recognize there's many programs that have been issued and put out by the federal government in the last 7 weeks or so, and which catered not only to those types of entities, but also to individuals. But for the sake of time, we thought we would focus in these two areas. Just to give you a brief history of First Nations Bank, First Nations Bank has been around for the last 20 years with catering to over 14,000 clients, which consists of commercial banking and retail banking with, again, focusing on Indigenous governments, their economic development corporate entities, and individual entrepreneurs and individual customers dealing within various regions throughout Canada, which includes Northern Canada from coast to coast. In terms of where we see things going, I'll just give you a quick snapshot of where our locations are as a bank. We have branches again throughout the nation. So this is where we focus on a lot of our energy, and when we've had a lot of inquiries and conversations with our First Nation clientele, our Inuit clientele, and our Métis clientele. Thinking of the COVID-19 impact, First Nations Bank is also considers itself a social responsible financial institution, where a lot of our business is coming from 90% of our Indigenous marketplace. Our ownership group is Indigenous shareholders, and we have a significant percentage of Indigenous employees. So everyone lives and breathes in these economies, and so we want to make sure we're looking after our people, and we see ourselves as that nation building asset. A lot of our portfolio consists of working with our Indigenous governments, and there's a number of COVID programs that did come out in early March. The biggest one, there's two big programs. One of them was a $100 million program that came out in around March 18th or so, and that program was really the response to the pandemic that did come out. And under that program, you could help deal with a number of factors within your communities, and in those communities, dealing whether it's supporting children, dealing with medical issues, getting the proper healthcare providers up into north, food security services, and those types of funds are accessed through your regional support offices, and are based on an application basis. And what First Nations Bank has helped to do with some of our customers is sometimes you got to spend the money before you access it. And so we would help bridge some of those funding arrangements for you, and working from that perspective. Sorry. Another big program. So another program was the $300 million fund that came out at the end of March. And that program was the $300 million, which is more discretionary, where leadership group could make priorities within their communities. And a lot of the focus on that was based on wellness, what requirements were to make sure your community stays healthy, remoteness factor, and population statistics. So there was a breakout between Inuit governments, First Nation governments, and Métis, with a small portion dealing with the urban community where certain programs were given out there. So a lot of that money has already been rolled out, but going forward, there is some specialized programs that can be accessed, and those can be related to nutrition in Northern Canada, post-secondary funding arrangements with students going to school. There was a $75 million pot there, and then other types of programs related to child and family services arrangements, where you would be able to help children in some of their specific needs. One of the biggest things that First Nations Bank was trying to do is, again, help facilitate that. But and then there's another big factor. So a lot of people are employed by a lot of Indigenous companies. So there's a number of programs that have come out related to that, and with those programs, they're all specifically related to business. So First Nations Bank had evolved a number of programs, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this over to Dan Murza, and he's going to be in a position to talk about these specific programs and related to the CEBA program and our BCAP program. So Dan, why don't I flip this over to you, and then maybe you can give a quick conversation around that.
Thank you, Kevin. If we could go back to slide 9, I'm going to talk about mainly the financing programs that have been rolled out and be made available. So slide 9 here talks about interest-free loans of up to $40,000. So this is probably the most widely known and talked about program thus far to support businesses in Canada. It's called the Canada Emergency Business Account Program, or also known as CEBA. So what this is a loan of up to $40,000, and the benefit to the business is that if they repay 75% of the loan, so i.e. $30,000 by December 31st of 2022, 10,000 of the loan will be forgiven without needing to pay it back. In essence, it'd be like a grant then. And further, the interest rate and repayment is 0 through December 31st, 2022 as well. The amount of the loan that's not repaid by that date would be termed out over 3 years and begin normal repayment at an interest rate of 5%. So the process to apply for these, some of you have probably already applied and gotten your money, but the process to apply is to apply at your financial institution. And it needs to be the bank at which the business had an account as at March 1st, 2020. And you need to apply by the end of June 30th. So with that, one stipulation, because this program is administered in the background by Export Development Canada, or EDC, the bank applying needs to be an eligible lender according to EDC. Now, all the big banks and most major credit unions, as well as First Nations Bank, are eligible lenders under EDC, but there's a chance your financial institution is not. And unfortunately, as of right now, the response we've got is that you won't be able to apply through them, but because of the stipulation of having to have an account as of March 1st, it might leave some businesses unserviced. So that's something we're still waiting to hear back on. So if any of you are dealing with a financial institution that cannot offer this program, stay tuned, and I'd continue to press and lobby about it, that you're being excluded. With the banks offering this program, because the loan is guaranteed 100% by the government, the process is very quick and easy. Usually it's just a tick list, a form that might take 5 minutes to complete and submit. And then now lots of these loans are being rolled out and funded within a matter of days. And that's to get money in your hands of your business while you need it most with your working capital, especially if your revenues are down, you're trying to sustain overheads and things like that. The only major qualification criteria is that your business needs to have had a payroll of between $20,000 and $1.5 million in 2019, and that's as per your T4 summary document. The other stipulation around this is that initially the program wasn't going to be available for businesses owned by government bodies like First Nations governments, but that has since been clarified and overturned, and now businesses owned by Indigenous governments are able to qualify and are eligible. I think I saw a question there about First Nation governments. So First Nation governments specifically cannot apply, and my understanding is tribal councils would not be able to apply as well. However, any subsidiary businesses, corporations, limited partnerships, and therefore should be able to apply. The question on the tribal council, you might want to get specific clarification on that, because I know some tribal councils have different kind of entities that they act under, and there might be a way to qualify under each entity as well. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to discuss another major program that has been rolled out. And this program is targeted more or also towards the medium-sized enterprises in the country. The CEBA focuses on small business because 40,000 isn't a heck of a lot of money for larger businesses who have significant working capital issues. So this next program is known as the Business Continuity Availability Program, or also known as BCAP. This is also offered through the Export Development Bank of Canada, or Export Development Canada, EDC. So it's the same criteria that the bank needs to be an eligible lender under EDC to apply there. Now, if your lender is not eligible under this program, you can go and approach one that is. So that doesn't preclude you like it might the CEBA program. This program is basically offers loans of up to $6.25 million through your bank, whereby the bank would obtain an 80% government guarantee through EDC. So with that, you'd still need to qualify and apply for the loan just like any other loan or line of credit with your bank. But the benefit is the bank will get an 80% government guarantee, which will reduce their risk and should, all else being equal, make it a little easier for them to approve it and overcome some concerns they may have with regards to maybe decrease in sales or tighter working capital or a more difficult economic environment due to the pandemic and so forth. So the government guarantee is intended to help offset that added risk that the bank may have and make it easier for them to approve the loan. Now this 80% guarantee comes with a 1.8% fee to EDC, to the government for it. But I would urge you to try to negotiate with your bank to reduce their interest rate because their loan is offset by 80% government guarantee and should have lower risk because of that. So with that, if you're able to get a lower rate because of the government guarantee, it can help offset that loan fee or that fee for the guarantee. Now, the main detail around this is these loans are intended to help with short-term working capital needs, carry overhead, inventory, and different expenses while sales are down and things like that due to COVID-19 impact. So with that, the term ideally is 1 year or less to repay it in full. And there is 1 year extension available. So a total of 24-month term is possible on this. So it's not really intended for long-term financing. It's for short-term liquidity purposes. Now, the process is to go approach your bank to apply for it. And then once they discuss and say they're prepared to work on an application, you'll need to fill out a 5 or 10 minute application form online with EDC. And when you fill that out, you'll get almost an instant email back, and that email will go to your bank as well that confirms your eligibility. So once you get your eligibility confirmed with EDC, the bank can proceed knowing that 80% government guarantee is in place, which will make it easier for them to adjudicate the loan application. So First Nations Bank has, we're proud to say we actually pushed through and funded the very first BCAP deal in Canada. So we have direct experience with this, and the program actually does run quite smoothly. You'd need a participating bank that would understand it and be comfortable with it, obviously. Moving on to the next slide. The next program I want to go over is a co-lending program. And that co-lending program is with Business Development Bank of Canada. So this is on slide 12. So what this program is, it offers another $6.25 million as a limit and to help capitalize operational cash flow needs and purchases and things like that due to the impact of the pandemic. Now, the limit is $6.25 million if your business has over 50 million in sales revenues. If your business has between 1 and 50 million, the limit's 3.1 million. And the way this works is you will apply for this loan at your bank or credit union, and then that bank will then approach BDC under the co-lending platform and be able to push off 80% of the loan amount to BDC, and in essence, 80% of the risk as well. And that will decrease that bank's exposure if they have some reluctance given, you know, a decrease or a worsening of your business climate or the economic climate in the industry and so forth, and help them to approve the credit and to a higher amount as well. So this process flows through your bank, who will facilitate it with BDC. You do not need to go to BDC with this. The biggest difference between this and the BCAP program is that you can have up to 10-year terms available on this. So there's a little longer term and grace period to repay this and recover from this, the pandemic versus the BCAP, which is up to 24 months. So one other question that often comes up is a business, they can apply for both. So conceivably a business, depending on the revenue base, could apply for both programs and get over 12 million in financing, depending on their need and the bank's approval. So as with the BCAP and this loan, the bank still needs to approve it and take on risk. So there's still that normal process. Whereas with the CEBA loans, they're basically, almost automatically approved once you're eligible because they're government guaranteed fully. So the next slide, slide 13 here, it goes over a few other support programs for Indigenous business. I should say that these programs are evolving daily, and even since we put this presentation together, I think it's probably a little bit dated. So the first point on here is this 306 million that was announced by the federal government recently to support Indigenous business. And we just received the most recent update on this, is that these funds will flow through NACA, the regional AFI network in Canada. And the target for the funds is for small Indigenous businesses. And it looks like the most recent advice suggests that the actual format will be similar to CEBA in that there will be $40,000 loans provided with $10,000 forgiven. So with that, it target the small businesses that the AFIs already deal with and that already have relationships with. And then once they run through all those, which I think there's around 6,000 businesses that could be supported under this pool of funds, then it would open up to potentially other Indigenous businesses out there. So the one concern with this is that it's kind of missing, it's missing the boat on the medium-sized businesses and businesses owned by Indigenous governments and First Nations and tribal councils and things like that. It's missing the support, but our understanding is the government is still looking to roll out another program to hit that market that's currently being missed. So with that, I don't think these facilities are quite ready to push through and fund, but I'd urge you to approach your regional FI in your area about it and to get on their list of follow-up to apply for these loans. Another program is BDC has a $2 million working capital loan available directly with BDC, where they'd have flexible repayment terms, including postponements. And that program would be direct with BDC, so you'd need to go straight to them. I don't believe you need to be an existing customer, so that would be straight to them. It's always helpful to work with your current bank on that to discuss so they know the larger picture as well. There's also programs available in specific provinces and territories that they may have rolled out in regard to working capital loans or tax deferrals. So make sure you stay attuned to any releases from your respective regional, provincial governments and territorial governments. And lastly, although it's not on here, there's the wage subsidy program. Initially, when that was rolled out, businesses owned by government bodies, Indigenous governments, they weren't going to be eligible for this. There was a lot of pushback on that, and the tune changed to make them eligible. But now there's questions and concerns from the accounting community about stipulations that might preclude a lot of businesses owned by Indigenous government bodies as well. So that is still very much up in the air, and I know a lot of you have probably inquired into that. So with that, I'd urge you to be in close contact with your accountants who would understand the structures of your businesses and the regulations and rules around this wage subsidies to understand if your business would qualify depending on its structure and whatnot. So with that, that concludes all the different programs we'll run through today here. But at the end of the day, what I'd really urge you to do when you look at your business and your strategy to deal with your COVID-19 impact is first to lay out what the impact has been to your businesses, what the impact has been to your cash flow, and determine what you think you might need for your business to survive these times and through the recovery and growth and so forth. Revise cash flow projections and determine what you need to maintain your overhead and things like that. And once you have that, I'd urge you to have a discussion with your bank, your financial institution, your accountants and to explore what programs might fit your need. So it'd be up to your bank to understand these programs available, especially the financing programs available. And if you come to them and say, this is what our business needs, they should be able to, discuss and brainstorm to see what support programs might be able to fill that need and help your business with its liquidity issues during the pandemic time, which could last quite a while still, especially through to recovery. So I urge you to have those discussions with your bank, or if you wanted to have that discussion with us, we're very welcome to have that as well, especially as it pertains to Indigenous business in Canada. So with that, I guess, I'm not sure if there's been some questions posed, but otherwise, I think on the last slide here, Terry, we have our contact information that if any of you wanted to jot it down, it has my contact and Kevin's contact, our phone numbers, our email addresses. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have offline if you didn't want to ask it now online, and or have a phone call or an email just about your particular business situation and what programs might be available for you or how you might be able to take advantage of it, to help support you. So we'd be more than happy to chat with any of you across Canada. And with that, I guess I'd like to thank you for your time here. Thank AFOA for inviting First Nations Bank to participate in this discussion. And we truly wish you all the best with your economic development activities, with the support for your communities during this time. And we hope you're able to find all the support you need to keep moving on and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And we have some time for question and answer. So if you'd like to ask some questions, by all means, we just gives it the ability to ask any questions that you could do it through chat, or you could do it through kind of raising your hand on the thing, and that we have staff that can help you ask your question. Are there any questions?
I see one question was about payroll eligibility for wages. The question about where it needs to show. So technically, the government says that you need to be prepared to show and substantiate your wages were between 20,000 and 1.5 million. And the typical way to do that is on your T4 sum document. So, so the answer is yes to the question that was asked, if it can be from a T4, and that's correct, and that's our understanding. Now I know on that document that the actual wages might be in one or two or three different box numbers, and we have had experience directly with customers having it in different box numbers, and they have worked in all cases. So so hopefully that's a positive answer to your question there.
Any other questions we have?
I see a question on what determines loan interest rates. So that's a very good question, especially in light of these programs. So typically, loan interest rates are determined by the risk of the loan to the bank. So the risk of the loan to the bank could be on the history of the business and its profitability, could be on the security you have to pledge to support the loan. So the stronger the security, the stronger the business history, the lower the interest rate. Now, in this case, you could have a business with a need whose risk has deteriorated because of the pandemic. Their sales have fallen off a cliff, maybe their business is closed and they have no revenues, or maybe they're carrying overhead and incurring losses. So the risk profile has increased, but lenders should be able to be a bit understanding to know that this could be temporary and that you can hopefully resume to recovery thereafter to offset that risk. Further, because all else being equal, I guess, it would suggest that your interest rate would be much higher during this time than it was before. But with these programs and the government guarantees, that should help offset that increased risk to offer a similar, maybe even a better interest rate because they have a government guarantee. So, it's those are all different factors that impact it, and depending on your business will depend on it. I mean, some loans we've done recently, the interest rates we offered were actually better than that business got during regular times because we now have a government guarantee backing it that helps reduce that risk. And that's part of the intent of the program from the government.
Is there another question there?
There's a question on how do they determine grants, and is there a different eligibility format than a loan? Kevin, did you want to answer that question? Because I know some of those grants, you went over a few of those programs regarding the grant funding, support funding.
Yeah, so I think everyone can hear me now. In terms of the difference between a grant and a loan, it depends on what sort of organization you are. If we're talking about the business-focused groups where it's either an Indigenous owned business or an individual owning a business, depending on whether you've applied with your financial institution through the CEBA program or the new money that's just been rolled out by the regional AFIs, which is that 300 million that has just been announced recently. In that program, as Dan had mentioned, there is a grant portion to that, and that's the 10,000 forgivable amount, and then the 30,000 loan around that. The CEBA program is a full loan, and but in terms of eligibility, it's basically just communicating directly with your AFI. The CEBA program is a very streamlined application process. It's just confirming that you had a payroll need that would qualify you through the CEBA program, and which is a loan, but a portion of it can be forgivable if you pay a certain portion of it back. So in terms of the qualifying criteria, I would say they're very consistent, and it will just determine on which program you go through, how much of it is a grant, how much of it is a loan. So.
Okay. Any other questions we might have?
So there's a question on whether or not a business who hires contractors to assist with management, are those considered eligible wages for the CEBA loan, which needs wages between 20,000 and 1.5 million? So that is a very good question. I haven't seen it challenged in practice yet, but I think you might want to check with your accountant on that, but it probably depends on how they're classified on your T4 summary document and how they're included, because we have seen some included in an other box that were pushed through and funded. So that one you might want to check with your accountant as per the specific rules around how that's actually classified.
All right. Any other questions we might have here? Once. Okay, seeing none, we certainly want to thank both Kevin and Dan for participating in our inaugural webinar here, certainly providing some very good information. And, I sort of impress upon everybody at this point, which is as we're going through this whole scenario, there's a real opportunity for sort of Indigenous groups to get left behind, I feel. And it's incumbent, I think, on people like us and certainly people who've taken our certifications and that kind of stuff. This is the time that we need to be working together and doing a lot of heavy lifting. Because the last thing we need to do is have our communities being left behind as a new economy kind of emerges. So, we got to put on our thinking hats, learn a lot of things like through these webinars that our corporate members are sharing with us. And certainly we will try to get you, if you believe that there's something that you certainly want us to get a webinar on, we're more than happy to line that up in our series. But next week, certainly want to thank First Nations Bank of Canada for their excellent presentation, and they're a strong supporter of AFOA Canada and its chapters. And next week, as we transition, we'll be at the same time next Thursday at 1 o'clock. And we'll be starting to do kind of a dive on financial management in terms of the expenditure reporting, as well as preparing for the remote audit, and MNP will be doing that one. So thank you everybody for attending this session, and hopefully we'll see you next week. We will have this session recorded and put it on our website. So if other members couldn't make it, that certainly will be available there, and we'll e-blast that out as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Much enjoyed this this webinar. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.